They say a dog's last breath carries the soul of everyone who ever loved it. On a misty Louisiana plantation in 1857, one woman felt that breath leave, and something inside her left with it. What came back wasn't the gentle Evelyn the quarters knew. It was something the Devereaux family would learn to fear when it was far too late. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a warning written in blood and silence. Meet Evelyn, a widowed slave woman in her late 40s. Her face was lined with years of grief, her hands scarred from lye soap and cotton thorns. But there was still a gentleness in her eyes that the cruelty of the plantation couldn't quite kill. The other slaves respected her. When someone fell ill, they came to Evelyn. When a child cried in the night, Evelyn would hum low songs that sounded like prayers. She carried dignity like a quiet flame in a world designed to extinguish it. But Evelyn wasn't truly alone. She had Mercy, a small black dog with one folded ear and eyes like warm chocolate. Scraggly, unremarkable to most, but to Evelyn she was everything. Mercy had belonged to her husband Samuel, a field hand who'd found the starving puppy near the creek 3 years ago. He'd nursed her back to health, sharing scraps from his own plate even when his stomach growled with hunger. 2 months after saving that dog, Samuel collapsed in the cotton fields. The overseer said it was heat stroke, but Evelyn had seen the whip marks. She'd washed the blood from his shirt. Samuel died that night holding her hand, whispering one word, Mercy. From that day on, the dog became Evelyn's shadow. Mercy followed her everywhere. To the laundry house where Evelyn scrubbed the master's fine linens until her knuckles bled. To the chapel steps on Sundays where the slaves gathered to sing hymns that spoke of a freedom they'd never see. To the small wooden shack Evelyn called home, where Mercy would curl against her feet each night, a warm reminder that love hadn't completely abandoned her. The children in the quarters would sneak Mercy bits of cornbread. Old Moses would scratch behind her ears and say, "That dog got more soul than half the white folks in that big house." Even Master Roland Devereaux tolerated Mercy's presence. Barely noticed her, really. She was just another creature on his property beneath his concern. But his son was different. Thomas Devereaux was 26 years old, handsome in that cruel, entitled way that comes from never being told no. Blonde hair slicked back with expensive pomade, cold blue eyes that looked through people rather than at them. He'd been sent home in disgrace from university in Charleston after some scandal involving gambling debts and a merchant's daughter. Now he skulked around the plantation, drunk more often than sober, nursing his bitterness like poison. And when Thomas was drunk, he became dangerous. One sweltering July evening, Thomas sat on the veranda with a bottle of whiskey, already 3 glasses deep. The air was thick and still, mosquitoes whining in the dusk. That's when he heard it, barking sharp and insistent. Mercy had spotted a raccoon near the garden and was doing what dogs do, protecting territory, making noise. To anyone else, it was just a dog being a dog. But to Thomas, in his whiskey-soaked rage, it was an insult, an annoyance, something that dared to disturb his evening. He slammed his glass down so hard it cracked. "What is that god-awful noise?" The overseer, a wiry, cruel man named Colt, appeared at his side like a shadow, always ready to obey, always eager to prove his loyalty through violence. "Just a dog, Master Thomas. Belongs to one of the quarters." Thomas's lip curled with disgust. "I don't care whose it is. I'm sick of hearing it. Get rid of that mutt tonight." Colt nodded once. He didn't ask questions. Men like Colt never did. When Evelyn returned from the laundry house that evening, her arms aching from hours of scrubbing, she called for Mercy like she always did. A soft whistle, a click of her tongue. Usually Mercy would come bounding around the corner, tail wagging, whole body wiggling with joy. But that night there was only silence. Heavy. Unnatural. The kind of silence that makes your chest tighten with dread. Evelyn searched everywhere. Behind the cabins. Near the well. Along the edge of the fields where Mercy sometimes chased rabbits. Her calls grew more desperate, voice cracking with fear. Other slaves joined in, spreading out across the quarters, but no one found her. Not until Evelyn walked behind the smokehouse, drawn by some terrible instinct she couldn't name. There in the dirt lay Mercy's small body. Neck broken. Eyes still open, staring at nothing. Evelyn didn't scream. Didn't cry out. She simply dropped to her knees, gathered that small broken body into her arms and held her, rocking slowly. The other slaves found her there an hour later, still holding Mercy, still rocking, her lips moving in silent prayer. When they tried to take the dog from her arms, Evelyn's eyes snapped up. And for just a moment everyone stepped back, because the gentleness was gone, replaced by something cold, something dark, something that would not forget. That night the fields fell silent except for one sound. Evelyn's whispered prayer carried on the wind like a curse. God may forgive, but I won't. Silence can be louder than screaming. And when Evelyn stopped speaking, the entire plantation felt it like a shift in the wind, like the moment before lightning strikes, when even the birds go quiet and the air tastes like metal and fear. Evelyn stopped speaking for weeks, not a word to anyone, not even to old Moses who'd been like a father to her, or to young Ruth who brought her water during the hottest hours. She worked like a ghost, moving through her tasks with her head down, eyes hollow and distant, lips moving only in silent prayer that no one could hear but everyone could feel. The other slaves whispered when she passed. She's talking to the spirits now, they'd say, crossing themselves even though the master forbade such superstitions. She's walked too close to the veil. Evelyn scrubbed linens with mechanical precision, her hands raw and bleeding, but she didn't seem to notice the pain. She was somewhere else, somewhere dark, somewhere the living couldn't follow. At night, when the others had fallen into exhausted sleep, Evelyn would slip out into the darkness carrying a small bundle wrapped in burlap. She walked to the edge of the cypress woods where the land turned soft, and the Spanish moss hung like funeral shrouds. There by the light of a sliver moon she dug a grave with her bare hands, nails breaking against roots and stones. She laid Mercy's body in the earth with a strip of Samuel's old shirt, the only thing she had left of him, and covered her with dark Louisiana soil. Over the grave, she planted wild jasmine cuttings stolen from the mistress's garden. Flowers that bloom white in darkness. Flowers that smell like hope in places where hope has died. She patted the earth smooth and whispered words no living soul would ever hear. The next morning, the mistress Margaret Devereaux found Evelyn in the kitchen and said with a cruel smile, "Still mourning that mongrel? It's just a dog, woman. You people cry over anything." Evelyn didn't reply, didn't even look up. But her silence felt heavier than words, thick and suffocating like humidity before a storm. Margaret's smile faltered. For just a moment she felt something cold crawl up her spine, something that made her want to leave the room even though she couldn't say why. That night, a storm rolled across the bayou like the wrath of something ancient and furious. Thunder shook the windows. Rain lashed the fields. And when morning came, the slaves gathered in silent awe at the edge of the property where lightning had split the massive oak tree, the one that had stood for 100 years, the one with the Devereaux family crest carved deep into its trunk. The tree was split clean down the middle, the crest blackened and smoking. Some called it coincidence, some called it God's hand. But Evelyn, standing in the rain with water streaming down her face like tears she refused to shed, called it something else. She called it a message. She called it the beginning. And when she finally smiled, just a small curve of her lips that no one else saw, it wasn't the gentle smile the quarters remembered. It was something darker. Something patient. Something that knew revenge like jasmine. Blooms best when planted in darkness and watered with silence. There's an old saying in the bayou. The most dangerous woman is one who knows which flowers heal and which flowers kill, and Evelyn knew them all. Weeks passed and Evelyn began to work again, but something fundamental had changed in the way she moved through the world. She volunteered for kitchen duty, something she'd always avoided before, and tended to the herb garden behind the smokehouse with a focus that bordered on obsession. Her fingers moved through the soil like she was reading secrets written in roots and leaves. She knew every plant by name, by smell, by the way they felt between her fingers in the dark. Lavender for sleep, chamomile for calm, foxglove for the heart, oleander for pain that never ends, nightshade for dreams you don't wake from. The cook, an old woman named Beulah, watched Evelyn with knowing eyes but said nothing, because some knowledge is too dangerous to speak aloud. When Margaret Devereaux fell ill with trembling hands and sleepless nights, complaining of anxiety and dark thoughts that wouldn't leave her mind, it was Evelyn who stepped forward with downcast eyes and offered to help. "I can brew a tonic, mistress," she said softly, her voice gentle as a lullaby. "For peace and sleep. My grandmother taught me. It'll calm your nerves." Margaret, desperate for relief and too proud to see a slave as a threat, agreed. Every night after that, Evelyn prepared the same tea in the quiet kitchen when no one else was around. Lavender and honey, chamomile and valerian root, and something else she kept in a small cloth pouch hidden in her apron. Something she harvested from the dark parts of the garden where nothing else would grow. She'd steep it carefully, strain it through clean muslin, and serve it on a silver tray with a gentle smile. "Drink it warm, mistress. Before bed, you'll sleep like an angel." And Margaret did drink it every single night because it did help at first, made her drowsy and peaceful, made the nightmares fade. But with each passing week something changed. The household grew weaker, almost imperceptibly at first. Thomas developed a cough that rattled in his chest, deep and wet and wrong. The master complained of headaches that medicine couldn't touch. The servants whispered that the walls smelled strange, like flowers rotting from the inside, like sweetness covering decay. But Evelyn kept serving, her hands steady as stone, her face a mask of concern and devotion. She'd adjust pillows and bring cool cloths and brew more tea, always more tea. At night, alone in her cabin, she'd sit by the small window and whisper to the darkness, to the memory of a small black dog who'd loved her unconditionally, to the ghost of a husband who'd died with her name on his lips. "Mercy was loyal," she'd say, her voice soft but carrying the weight of iron. "And mercy always returns. Not as forgiveness, not as grace, but as a reckoning." The jasmine over Mercy's grave grew wild and thick, blooming even when it shouldn't, filling the night air with a scent so sweet it almost hurt to breathe. Some of the slaves refused to walk near it after dark. They said they could hear things in the wind there, whispers that sounded like warnings, like promises being kept in a language older than words. When a house turns against its masters, when the very walls seem to breathe with malice, that's when you know something unnatural has taken root, something that won't rest until blood answers for blood. Strange things began to happen in the Devereaux mansion. Small at first, easy to dismiss as coincidence or imagination. The dogs that had roamed the property for years suddenly refused to enter the main hall. cowering and whimpering at the threshold as if they could see something human eyes couldn't. The horses in the stable would panic near the well where the household drew water, rearing and screaming until the stable boys had to drag them away with ropes and curses. At night, the family swore they heard sounds that shouldn't exist in a house of wood and stone, scratching beneath the floorboards like claws on wood, persistent and rhythmic. Always moving, always searching. Margaret would wake in the dead hours before dawn, her nightgown soaked with sweat, gasping that she'd seen the black dog standing at her bedside, just standing there with those chocolate eyes, watching her with an intelligence that dogs shouldn't possess, and when she'd scream and reach for the lamp it would be gone, leaving only the scent of wet earth and jasmine. Thomas, already weakened by his mysterious cough, became paranoid and volatile, firing his pistol into shadows that moved wrong, into corners where the darkness seemed thicker than it should be, reloading with shaking hands and screaming at servants to check the walls, check the floors, find whatever was making those sounds. The overseer Colt, that cruel, wiry man who'd killed Mercy without a second thought, quit suddenly one October morning, his face gray as ash, telling the master that he was leaving Louisiana and never coming back because that house ain't got peace no more, and I ain't staying to find out what it's got instead. Roland Devereaux tried to maintain order, tried to convince himself and his family that it was just stress, just illness, just the dampness of the bayou playing tricks. But even he couldn't explain why every mirror in the house had developed a strange fog that wouldn't clean away, or why the temperature in Margaret's bedroom had dropped so low they could see their breath even in the summer heat, or why the servants had started sleeping in the quarters rather than their usual rooms in the house, claiming they'd rather risk the master's anger than spend another night under that cursed roof. Evelyn moved through this chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra only she could hear. She lit candles every evening at the window of the main house, 3 of them always arranged in a perfect line. When Margaret asked her why, Evelyn's answer was soft and gentle. One for the living, one for the dead, one for those caught in between, mistress. It's an old custom. Keeps the spirits calm. But that was a lie, and somewhere deep in her fever-addled mind, Margaret knew it. The candles weren't for calming anything. They were markers, beacons, invitations to something that had been waiting in the dark, patient and hungry. Each night Evelyn would light them and whisper prayers that sounded like blessings but felt like curses. And each night, one of those candles would burn lower than the others, melting faster, as if something invisible was feeding on its light. The slaves who still worked the fields could see those candles from a distance. 3 small flames in the window of a dying house, and they'd make signs against evil and hurry past, because they understood what the Devereaux family didn't, that Evelyn hadn't just planted jasmine over Mercy's grave. She'd planted a seed of vengeance that was now blooming throughout that entire plantation, roots spreading through floorboards and foundations, vines wrapping around throats in the darkness, flowers opening to release a perfume that smelled like justice wrapped in funeral cloth. The mansion itself seemed to sag under some invisible weight, paint peeling, wood warping, as if the very structure was rejecting the people who lived inside it, trying to expel them like poison from a wound. There comes a moment in every act of revenge when patience transforms into action, when the slow poison finally reaches the heart, when the hunter stops watching and strikes, and on one storm-drunk autumn night, that moment arrived like thunder splitting the world in 2. By autumn, the Devereaux mansion stood nearly empty, a hollow shell of what it had been just months before. The servants had fled or been dismissed, unwilling to stay in a house that felt more like a tomb than a home. Margaret's lustrous hair had gone completely gray, her face gaunt and hollow, her hands trembling so badly she could no longer hold a teacup without spilling it. Thomas was confined to his bed, feverish and delirious, coughing blood into handkerchiefs that Evelyn washed without expression, watching the red stains swirl down the drain like judgment made liquid. Even Roland, who'd built his fortune on the backs of human suffering, had been reduced to a shadow. His robust frame withered, his commanding voice now a weak rasp. The doctor came and went, finding nothing wrong, nothing he could name, prescribing tonics and rest while privately telling Roland that perhaps it was time to consider selling the property and moving somewhere drier, somewhere without the oppressive weight of the bayou pressing down like a hand around the throat. But it was too late for running. Too late for salvation, too late for anything except the ending that had been written the moment Mercy's neck was broken behind that smokehouse. On a night when thunder rolled across the plantation like drums announcing an execution, when lightning turned the sky white and the rain fell so hard it sounded like thousands of fingers drumming on the roof, Evelyn stood in the doorway of Margaret's bedroom holding a single candle, her face illuminated from below, her eyes reflecting the flame in a way that made her look like something that had crawled up from the earth itself. Margaret, propped up on pillows, her breath shallow and labored, looked at Evelyn and for the first time truly saw her, saw the intelligence and rage and patient calculation that had been there all along, hidden behind downcast eyes and gentle words. "Do you hear her?" Evelyn whispered, her voice soft as silk over steel. Margaret's lips trembled. "Who? Hear who?" "The dog you killed. The one your son ordered broken like she was nothing. Can you hear her scratching? She's been looking for you, mistress. She's been waiting." Margaret tried to scream, but her voice came out as a whimper, and that's when the smell hit her, stronger than ever before. Not jasmine now, but something chemical and wrong, oil and wine and accelerant. And she realized with horror that the floors were wet. That liquid had been spread through the hallways and rooms while she'd been too weak to notice, while the storm had covered the sound of preparation. Evelyn turned and walked away, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floors, and as she descended the grand staircase for the last time, she heard Thomas calling out in his delirium, heard Roland stumbling from his study demanding to know what was happening, but their voices seemed distant and unimportant, like echoes from a world that was already ending. She reached the kitchen where the iron stove burned hot despite the late hour, where coals glowed red like the eyes of something ancient and hungry, and she simply tipped the oil lamp onto the floor, watching as the flames caught and spread with impossible speed, racing along the trails she'd prepared, climbing walls and consuming curtains, transforming the mansion into a cathedral of fire. Evelyn walked out into the rain without looking back, her white dress plastered to her thin frame, her arms spread wide as lightning illuminated her silhouette against the burning house, and the rain that fell on her face could have been water or tears or baptism, cleansing her of the gentleness that slavery had demanded, revealing the iron underneath. Behind her, the Devereaux mansion burned like a signal fire visible for miles, flames reaching toward the storm clouds as if trying to grasp heaven itself, and inside, the screams were swallowed by the roar of timber collapsing and glass exploding, and justice finally being served. Some stories don't end when the flames die down. They transform into something else entirely, into whispers that outlive empires, into legends that refuse to be forgotten no matter how many years pass or how deep the ashes settle. By morning, nothing remained of the Devereaux mansion, but a blackened skeleton of timbers reaching toward a gray sky like the ribs of some great beast that had finally died. The rain had stopped just before dawn, leaving the ruins steaming and smoking, the air thick with the smell of charred wood and something else, something sweeter and more terrible that the survivors couldn't quite name. They found 3 bodies in the wreckage, burned beyond recognition but identified by the jewelry that had survived the heat. Margaret's wedding ring fused to bone, Thomas's gold watch stopped at exactly midnight. Roland's signet ring bearing the family crest that lightning had split from the oak tree months before. The authorities came, asked their questions, wrote their reports with the casual indifference of men investigating the death of slaveholders in a region where such things happened with uncomfortable frequency. Accidental fire, they concluded, caused by the storm, by lightning perhaps, by the general decay of a plantation that had been failing for years. No one mentioned the oil trails. No one mentioned the deliberate nature of the blaze. No one wanted to imagine that a slave woman could orchestrate such perfect destruction. The remaining slaves were sold off at auction within the week, scattered across Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, their lives fragmenting into different plantations, different masters, different hells. But wherever they went, they carried the story with them, whispered it in the quarters after the overseers had gone to bed, passed it down to their children and their children's children. The tale of gentle Evelyn who loved a dog more than life itself, and made a family pay for taking that love away. And Evelyn herself? She was never seen again after that night. Some said she perished in the flames, that her body was simply never found among the ruins. Others claimed they saw her walking into the cypress woods as the mansion burned, disappearing into the mist like smoke dissolving into smoke. A few swore she made it north on the Underground Railroad, that sympathetic souls had sheltered her and guided her to freedom, that somewhere in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Canada, she lived out her days in peace, finally free. But the truth, like most truths involving revenge and ghosts and the debts that history never fully pays, was something stranger and more persistent. Years passed, decades. The Civil War came and went. Slavery ended officially, though its ghosts remained, and the land where the Devereaux plantation had stood was sold and resold, divided and forgotten, until it was just another piece of Louisiana swamp that no one wanted to develop because the ground was too soft and the memories too hard. Yet travelers passing through that stretch of road at night, particularly when the moon was dark and the mist rose from the bayou like breath from sleeping mouths, they began to report strange things. They heard a dog barking in the distance, sharp and insistent, the way dogs bark when they're protecting something precious or warning of danger approaching. They saw a woman's shadow near the ruins of the old oak tree, the one split by lightning that still stood like a monument to divine intervention, a shadow holding a lantern that glowed not with oil flame but with something cooler and older, something that looked like captured moonlight. And strangest of all, they found jasmine growing wild around a small raised mound at the edge of the cypress woods, jasmine that bloomed even in winter when such flowers should be dead, that filled the air with perfume so intense it made people weep without knowing why, that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness as if the flowers themselves were made of light and memory and love, that refused to die. The locals learned not to disturb that place. They'd tell visitors, especially white visitors from up north who came looking for ghost stories and Civil War history, don't go near them flowers after dark. Don't matter if you believe or not. Some things don't need your belief to be real. Some things just are. Children who grew up in the area swore they'd seen both of them on foggy nights, the woman and the dog, walking together through the ruins as if inspecting a job well done, as if ensuring that the lesson taught in fire and blood was never forgotten. The woman always wore white, they said, a dress that seemed to float rather than hang, and the dog was small and black with one folded ear and eyes that reflected starlight. They never threatened anyone, never chased or frightened. They simply existed. A reminder that mercy, real mercy, isn't about forgiveness or turning the other cheek. Sometimes mercy is about balance, about ensuring that those who show no mercy receive exactly what they've given, about a love so fierce it burns through death itself and plants flowers in ashes. The historians don't record Evelyn's story in their books. The tour guides don't mention her when they talk about the great plantations of Louisiana. But in the quarters, in the communities that remember, in the families descended from those who witnessed what happened when gentleness finally broke and became something else entirely, they still tell the story. They still say her name. They still teach their children that the most dangerous thing you can do is mistake kindness for weakness. Or break something that someone loves because some debts echo across generations, and some flowers bloom forever in soil watered with tears and blood and vengeance that called itself mercy. And on quiet nights when the wind moves through the jasmine and the scent carries for miles, you can almost hear it. A woman's voice soft as prayer and hard as stone, saying what she said that terrible night when everything changed. God may forgive, but I won't. Some stories don't end in fire. They live on in whispers, in places where mercy never truly dies but transforms into something eternal, something that watches and waits and remembers every single debt that history tries to forget. If this story touched something in you, if you felt every moment of Evelyn's pain and triumph, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that history tried to bury. Drop a comment telling me what you think happened to Evelyn. Did she survive? Did she become something else? And remember, the next time you see jasmine blooming where it shouldn't, think of mercy. Think of Evelyn. Think of all the gentle souls who were pushed too far and became legends written in fire and flowers.